3 years ago, my husband disappeared without a trace. One normal morning, he kissed me before going to work like every other day, saying he would come home early to have dinner with me. But that was the last time I saw him. No one picks up the phone. No one answers messages. I called the police, but they couldn't find any trace of him. There were no accidents, no records of hospitalization, no signs of an abduction. He disappeared like he never existed. For the past 3 years, I've been searching everywhere. I walked through hundreds of streets, pasting his photo on cold walls. I was hoping for calls from the police, information from strangers, but all were in vain. The man I loved disappeared from my life, leaving me in an endless void of waiting and despair. I used to believe that I could wait my whole life. I cried my eyes out, wondering thousands of times, why did he leave like that? Have you encountered anything? Are you still alive? Or have you forgotten me? And then one fateful day I found him. Not in a hospital room, not during a call from the police. I found him when he was smiling happily with another woman. That day, I went to the supermarket like every other day. As I was pushing the cart through the crowded aisle, I accidentally turned around, and my heart felt like it was breaking on the spot. On the opposite side, a man was standing there smiling brightly. He was wearing a casual shirt, chatting happily with an attractive long-haired woman with a small child in a stroller. It's him, my husband. My heartbeat stopped. My body seemed frozen, every muscle tensed in shock. I squinted my eyes, thinking I was dizzy. But no, that's you. The man I have been looking for the past 3 years is now happy with another family. I tightened my grip on the side of the stroller. My breathing quickened, my throat constricted. It feels like the whole world collapsed right before my eyes. I wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to ask him why, but I couldn't lift my legs. I just stood there watching him smile, watching him bend down and kiss the forehead of the child in the stroller. Why are you here? Why didn't you find me? Have you forgotten me? Where have you been these past 3 years? Who was the woman next to him? That baby? Is it your child? Hundreds of questions flooded my mind, but no answers. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like an invisible hand was squeezing my chest. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to face this truth. Everything around blurred. His laughter, the woman's voice rang out like knives cutting into my heart. He was never missing. He's just missing in my life. I bit my lip to keep from crying. I wanted to rush to ask him everything I had kept in my heart for the past 3 years. But then, I realized I couldn't. He is happy. No worries, no signs that he remembered me. I gripped the cart tightly, my nails digging deep into my skin. I can't stay here another second. I turned around and walked away, feeling like my whole body was falling apart. But as I was leaving, I heard something that made me stop. The other child called him Dad. That was the moment I understood that I lost you forever. I quickly walked out of the supermarket, my steps aimlessly amidst the bustling crowd. My head was spinning. Every beat of my heart pounded against my chest. I can't understand. You lived a new life while I was still stuck in the past? The cold wind swept past, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. Everything around me became meaningless. For the past 3 years, I've been tormenting myself, waiting in vain, but it turned out I'm just an abandoned fool. My tears rolled down. Why didn't you find me? If you really love me, why did you choose another life without once turning back? The whole world felt like it was collapsing around me. But the worst was not over yet. I know that the truth behind is even scarier than I imagined. 3 years ago, I was a lucky woman. I have a peaceful life, a thoughtful husband, and a small house full of laughter. David, my husband, is an exemplary man who always cares about me every little bit. He is not the type of romantic man with expensive gifts or sweet words, but he always shows his love through actions. Even though he's busy with work, he always remembers anniversaries, always appears at the right time when I need him, and always spends time with me every night. We were together 8 years before he disappeared. Those days weren't perfect, but they were full of happiness. I remember the mornings when he woke up before me, made coffee and put it on the table. I remember those rainy nights when he pulled me into his arms and whispered old stories to help me sleep. I remember even the small arguments, the moments when we solved every problem together and understood that love is not always about harmony, but about the willingness to overcome everything together. David never hides anything from me. We share everything, from his work pressures to my small dreams. So, when he disappeared without a trace, I couldn't believe that it was a choice he made. No letter, no goodbye, no warning sign. Our lives before he left weren't any different. The last day he was with me happened like any other day. We had breakfast together. He kissed me before going out the door, and I watched him leave as I had done for the past 8 years. But this time, he didn't come back again. At first, I thought maybe something unexpected happened to him. A long meeting, an unexpected business trip that he forgot to notify in advance. But when night fell, when the phone remained unanswered, when all my messages fell silent, I began to fear. I called everywhere, to colleagues, to friends, even to hospitals and police departments. But no one knows anything about him. It seems like he has disappeared from this world without leaving any trace. The police say adults are free to leave if they want, but I don't believe David is that type of person. You won't leave me without an explanation. The days that followed were the darkest days of my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was almost crazy with anxiety. Every day I went out, posted flyers looking for missing people, searching in vain. But gradually, people around started to stop searching. My friends comforted me that perhaps David left for a personal reason. Some people even suggested that maybe he chose to leave me without explaining. I cannot accept that. Our house became a shadow of the past. Everything in there remains the same as the day he left. I didn't dare touch his wardrobe, didn't dare change anything in our bedroom. Every night, I still lie on the side of the bed he usually lies on, but there is only emptiness there. 3 years have passed and I still can't find an explanation. I tried to move on, but I never really forgot him. I told myself that one day he would come back. He would knock on the door and explain everything. I live in a weight that I don't even understand. And then I saw him. That day at the supermarket. Not a wandering man, not a man with amnesia, not a man who returns tormented. He smiled brightly. He lived happily. He had a new life. I don't know how long I stood there. All the years of pain, the sleepless nights, the tears I shed for you, now becomes meaningless. David was not kidnapped. He didn't have an accident. He doesn't lose his memory. He simply left. I stepped back, my steps heavy. I didn't want to believe my eyes, but the image was so clear. The small child called him Dad. The woman next to him hugged his arm as if they had known each other for a long time. So what have I done these past 3 years? I have tortured myself, lived in pain because of someone who chose to forget me. I turned around and left the supermarket, my heart filled with hurt, but also filled with determination. I need to know the truth. If David has left me for another woman, I want to know why. I want to know how you lived, where you went, and most of all, I wanted to know if everything we had was just one beautiful lie. I won't let my past be buried in darkness anymore. This time, I will find out the truth. That morning started like any other day. I woke up in David's arms, feeling the familiar warmth of his body. He was always the first to wake up, but that morning, he still lay next to me, smiling when he saw me open my eyes. "I love you," he whispered before getting out of bed to get ready for the day. We had breakfast together and talked about future plans. There were no signs of an impending tragedy. When he put on his coat and walked out the door, I simply thought that he would return in the evening, like many times before. But that didn't happen. David never returned. That evening, I cooked dinner as usual. I texted him, but received no response. I called, but the phone was turned off. At first, I didn't worry too much. I told myself that maybe he was busy in a meeting. Maybe he forgot to charge his phone. But when the clock struck 10 at night, then 12, then dawn the next morning, and there was still no sign of him, fear began to creep inside me. I called his colleagues, but no one knew where he was. I contacted his friends, but no one saw him throughout the day. At that point, I started to panic. The next morning, I went to the police station to report the disappearance. The police received information but did not promise anything. They say that adults have the right to disappear if they want. Maybe your husband just needs some time alone, a police officer said, his eyes filled with sympathy. But I know David is not that type of person. You will never leave me without saying a word. The next days were a nightmare. I wandered around, posting flyers looking for missing people, asking anyone who might know something. But all there was eerie silence. There aren't any clues. No accidents were recorded. No one saw him leave the city. David seemed to have evaporated from the world. 3 months passed and the police began to gradually lose interest in his disappearance. A young police officer told me bluntly, "It's possible that your husband left voluntarily. Maybe he was having financial problems, or there was something he didn't want to share with you." I strongly object. David never hides anything from me. He doesn't have financial problems, and we don't have any serious conflicts. But gradually, those words began to creep into my thoughts. What if David really left for some reason? What if he feels burdened in our marriage? What if he doesn't love me anymore? Friends and family advised me to accept reality. They told me that maybe he had gone to another life, that I should let go and continue living. But I can't. How can I forget the man I love? How can I believe that he left without a reason? Everything was so sudden, so confusing. I continued searching. I don't give up. But then, one day, I received an anonymous message. Forget him. I was dumbfounded when I read that line. Who sent this message? What do they know about David? I tried to trace the phone number but couldn't find out who was behind it. The fear inside me grew bigger and bigger. I started wondering, did David really disappear or did someone make him go? I don't have the answer. I just know that 3 years later, I saw him living a new life with another woman. And that's when I realized everything I believed in might just be a lie. After 3 years of suffering and despair, I gradually learned to live without David. But no matter how much time passes, I still can't forget you. I can't accept that you disappeared without leaving a trace. Then one day, while taking a walk with my best friend Anna, I overheard her say something that made me stunned. "Have you ever thought that David might still be alive?" Anna asked, her eyes full of doubt. I looked at her, frowned, my heart pounding. "Why do you say that?" Anna bit her lip, then sighed. "Because I thought I saw him." That statement almost made me succumb. "What did you say?" I almost whispered. "I'm not sure," Anna replied quickly. "But a month ago, when I went to another city to visit relatives, I swore I saw a man who looked like David. He was with a woman and a child. But when I got closer, he turned away and left that cafe. I thought I was mistaken. But now, I don't know anymore. I feel the whole world is spinning. A feeling of insecurity rose in my heart. If it's really David, why hasn't he ever returned? Why do you live somewhere else? I cannot let this pass without investigation." I started checking again all of David's bank accounts, which I haven't touched since you disappeared. And that's when I discovered the scariest thing. There were recent bank transactions from a location he had never been to before. I froze. If David is missing, why is his account still active? Who is using it? And why are there withdrawals from a foreign city? I decided to follow the trail. I researched the addresses of the transactions and discovered them a residential area more than 200 miles from my city. This is too strange. Someone is using David's money, or he was never really gone. While I was still deep in thought, a strange message was sent to my phone. No sender name, just one sentence. Forget him. I stiff. Everything inside me felt pushed to the limit. I stared at the phone screen, my fingers trembling as I touched the message. Someone doesn't want me to look for David. But why? And more importantly, who are they? At this moment, my fear is no longer the pain of loss, but a feeling I had accidentally stepped into a mystery that was more dangerous than I thought. I can't stop anymore. I need to know the truth, no matter how cruel it is. One day, while shopping at the mall, the wife accidentally saw her husband. She hadn't seen him in a long time, and all she knew was a simple message that he needed some time to think. Time passed, from day to day. She waited in vain, called, but no one answered, sent messages with no response. She thought he had encountered something unfortunate, or worse, was facing some terrible problem that he didn't want her to know about. But right now, right before her eyes, he was standing there, not looking like a man in pain or in crisis. He was never missing. He still lives normally. He just doesn't want to go home. What made the wife dumbfounded was not only the fact that her husband appeared here, but the intimacy between him and the woman next to him. She was more than just a friend or a business partner. He was holding her waist, whispering something that made them both laugh happily. The naturalness in their gestures was as if they had known each other for a long time. It wasn't forced. It wasn't a quick meeting, but something that happened intentionally, over a long enough period of time for them to become this close. The husband she once loved, the one she trusted absolutely, was now standing in front of her with another woman, in a world she had never had the chance to enter. Everything in her mind went blank. She no longer heard the loud music from the surrounding stores, no longer felt the bustle of the shopping center. Everything seemed to fall silent. Only the image of him and that woman remained. Her heart was pounding, her hands clenched reflexively. She didn't know what she should do, rush over and question or turn around and leave. Part of her wanted to believe that this was just a misunderstanding, that there was a reasonable explanation for all that was happening before her eyes. But the rest of my mind is screaming, this is the truth. She took a deep breath to calm herself. If she rushes to confront them right now, he will probably cover it up, will find a way to deny it, and she will never know the whole story. No, she couldn't let that happen. She needs to find out the truth. She decided to follow them. In the middle of a crowded crowd, she quietly followed, keeping enough distance to not be detected. They stopped at a jewelry store. The other woman pointed to a ring in the glass case, her eyes sparkling as she looked up at the man. And he, without any hesitation, smiled, nodded, and signaled the staff to take out the ring for her to try on. The wife almost couldn't believe her eyes. A ring? For her? The image before her eyes was like a knife stabbing straight into her heart. This is not a chance meeting. This is not a budding relationship. This is a betrayal that has been prepared for a long time. The husband she once trusted, the one she had worried about all this time, was now happily choosing a ring for another woman. If she hadn't witnessed it with her own eyes, she probably would never have believed that one day she would become a character in such a tragic story. They left the store, hand in hand, toward a small cafe in the corner of the mall. She continued to follow, choosing a hidden seat behind the screen to observe. She couldn't hear what they said, but through their eyes, gestures, and smiles, she could guess that they weren't just strangers they had just met. The closeness between them was as if they had been through a lot together, as if she was the one on the outside, not the other woman. A series of questions arose in her heart. How long have they been together? Is this why he disappeared without explanation? What did she do wrong to get to this point? How much did she trust him? How many years did she spend raising her family? And this is what she got in return? Amidst the chaotic thoughts, she suddenly realized something. This is not simply a man's betrayal of his wife. She remembered everything that had happened all this time. His sudden disappearance, the hidden messages, the long silence. Was she deceived from the beginning? Was everything she believed in just a carefully orchestrated act? She remembered the times he told her that work was too busy, that he needed more time to handle a big project. She remembered the evasive phone calls, the messages she read but didn't respond to, the long nights she stayed up waiting in vain. Now, all have been answered. He is not busy, nor does he have any projects. He had another life, another woman, while she still naively believed that he just needed some quiet time to think about their relationship. The truth is distorted, not just by lies, but by her own beliefs. She had been lying to herself this whole time, had been trying to find rational explanations instead of facing the reality that maybe, in the first place, he never really belonged to her. Her hand was clenched so tightly that her nails dug deep into her palm, but she didn't feel any pain. The real pain was coming from inside, from where her heart was breaking into pieces. She had thought that when she saw him again, she would ask why. But now, having seen it all, she knew she didn't need any more explanations. Everything was so clear. When the man stood up, put his arms around the woman and placed a kiss on her forehead, that was the final moment that made the wife no longer have any doubts. It was not a chance meeting, not a brief mistake, but a real relationship. He chose this life, chose that girl, and most importantly, chose to leave her without once looking back. The wife sat quietly for a long time. She didn't shed tears, didn't break down like she thought she would do if one day she discovered this truth. She just felt a strange emptiness. She was no longer the miserable woman waiting for a phone call. She is no longer the wife who worries about where her husband is or what he is doing. Now, she knows it all, and perhaps that's the only thing she needs. She slowly stood up and left the cafe. She no longer wanted to continue following them. She had seen enough, and now it's time for her to face the reality that this marriage is over, even if she was never the one to make that decision. She couldn't let doubt torment her any longer. What she witnessed at the mall was not a coincidence or a simple misunderstanding. Her husband, who disappeared without explanation, is now living a completely different life that she has never known. She decided to find out the truth. At first, she just silently observed. She searched online, trying to find information that might be related to him, but there was no trace. There were no social media updates, no new career information. None of their mutual friends had heard anything about him. But then she remembered one detail: the car he was driving when she saw him at the mall. It was not their family's familiar car, but a different model, more luxurious, more expensive, and most importantly, she had never seen it before. That means how much has he changed his life? She turned to an old friend, someone who used to work in private investigation. After much hesitation, she decided to hire him to track down her husband. She needed to know where he was, what he was doing, and why he had a completely different life without once telling her. After just a few days, what her friend brought home made her completely dumbfounded. Her husband had another identity. He no longer uses his old name but has changed to a new one, registered a new address, a new job, and the most important thing, he is living as a single man. There is no sign that he ever had a family, ever had a wife waiting for his return. His new apartment is located in a luxury apartment complex, completely different from the old house they used to live together. There was no trace of family life there, no wedding photos, no old furniture, nothing that reminded her of the marriage she had believed to be a happy one. Instead, everything is perfect and neat, like a model apartment arranged for a successful single man. She felt like she was falling into a nightmare. The man she once loved, once trusted, is now living a life she has never known. And the scariest thing is that he deliberately erased all traces of her, as if she had never existed in his life. She couldn't stop. She continued to dig deeper, and the truth gradually revealed itself as each layer of mystery was exposed. Her husband resigned from his old company right after leaving her. No one knows where he went or what he did next. With a new identity, he applied to work at another company, holding a completely different position than before. Everything was so perfect it was scary, as if he had planned it all along. Why did he abandon his family without saying a word? That question tormented her mind every second and every minute. There is no reason for a man to suddenly disappear without explanation. There are no signs of a financial or debt crisis. There is no information about him getting into legal trouble. And most importantly, if he really no longer loves her, why not simply divorce? Why create a new life, a new identity, as if trying to hide something? She decides to face him, but she couldn't do that without a clear plan. If he has tried to bury the past to this extent, can she get him to tell the truth? She continued to watch. She observes his apartment, taking note of his daily habits. He often leaves home early in the morning, goes to the company to work all day, then returns in the evening. But there's a strange thing. He never comes home late. There's no sign of living with anyone else. There's no sign that he's truly happy. One night, as he was leaving the apartment, she decided to enter. She knew she shouldn't, but she needed answers. She managed to get inside, and what she saw took her breath away. Everything is new. New clothes, new furniture. Even the paintings hanging on the wall had nothing in common with his previous taste. She found a file on his desk. In it were all the documents related to his new identity. The rental contract, the employment contract, everything was legal but so perfect. She continued searching, and finally, she found a small box hidden deep in a drawer. Inside were a series of old photos. Photos of them, their wedding photos, family photos that he would have thrown away if he wanted to break with the past. But he didn't. He still keeps it all. She suddenly understood something. He may have left her, but he never truly broke with the past. There was a reason why he had to do that, a reason she didn't know yet. While she was engrossed in thought, a sound suddenly rang out. The door opened. He returned earlier than expected. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, looking at him in shock. He too, his eyes wide open, not believing what was happening before his eyes. They were both silent for a moment that seemed to last forever. And then, with a trembling voice, she asked, "Why?" The man standing in front of her didn't look angry or surprised. He did not rush to question her for breaking into his house. Instead, he sighed, as if he could finally run away no longer. "I have no choice," he said, his voice hoarse. "There are no other options?" She laughed bitterly. "So disappearing, creating a new identity, living as a bachelor, is that the way you choose?" He looked at her for a long time, then silently nodded. "I'm sorry." Just those 3 simple words, but they weren't enough to ease the pain that was burning her. Not enough to answer the painful days she waited. Not enough to explain why the man she loved so cruelly erased her from his life. She walked towards him, looking straight into his eyes. "I want to know the truth," she said slowly, word by word. "He can't hide anymore. The truth that she has been searching for so long is finally about to be revealed. But is she ready to accept it?" Stood in front of the man she trusted, loved, and waited for all this time. Now, he is living a completely different life, with a different identity, while she knows nothing about what happened. She had investigated, searched, and followed until finally she could stand here, face him directly, to hear the explanation from his own mouth. She thought a lot about what could happen. A financial secret? A pre-planned betrayal? A selfish decision just to free yourself? But no, she couldn't imagine what he was about to say. The husband stood facing her, his eyes empty, but also carrying vague fear. She clearly saw the struggle in him, not concealment, but something deeper, a confusion as if he himself couldn't understand what was going on. She couldn't wait any longer. "You owe me an explanation," she said, her voice cold but trembling. "I owe you a favor." He took a deep breath, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of silence, he said, "I don't remember anything about you." That statement hit her like a knife. She couldn't believe her ears. She waited for an admission, an excuse, even a clumsy lie. But instead, what she received was just absolute emptiness. "What are you talking about?" She shook her head and stepped back. "How is that possible? We've been together for so many years. We had a life together, a family. How can you say you don't remember anything about me?" He turned away, his hands shaking as if he himself didn't know how to explain this. I don't remember. It's not just about you, but about everything. She couldn't accept such a vague explanation. Do you have amnesia? She emphasized each word, trying to find a bit of sincerity in his eyes. Yes, he admitted, his voice choked. 3 years ago, I had an accident, a serious car accident. When he woke up, he didn't remember anything about himself. Didn't remember who he was. Didn't remember where he came from. She felt her legs lose strength, but she remained standing. So why didn't you find me? Why don't you try going back home? Don't try to find out about your life. He laughed softly, but it was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of despair, because when I woke up, I wasn't in the hospital. He was in a strange apartment with a woman he didn't know. She said you were her lover. Her heart broke again, but this time it was even more painful than the betrayal. Her husband, who she thought had abandoned her heartlessly, had actually been cheated on for the past 3 years. What did she say to you? Her voice was dry, as if every word she uttered consumed all her strength. He swallowed hard, then slowly recounted everything. When he woke up after the accident, his memory was completely blank. He doesn't know who he is, doesn't remember where he comes from. That woman, the one his wife had now seen with him at the mall, had been there since the moment he opened his eyes. She took care of him, comforted him, told him that they were a couple who had been in love for a long time. She concocted the perfect story, one that was logical enough to convince an amnesiac man that he was really her boyfriend. I trusted her, he admitted, his voice filled with bitterness, because I have nothing else to believe in. The wife was speechless. During the past 3 years, she had suffered, wondered what she had done wrong, and tormented herself with unanswered questions. But the reality is even more cruel. Her husband never betrayed her, never left her. He was stripped of his memories, stripped of his entire life. What did she do to you? He sighed. She has become everything I know. When he asked about his family, she said he was an orphan. When he asked about his friends, she said that he used to live alone, with no one but her. When he asked about old photos, she gave him an album full of photos he didn't recognize, but had him in them, spliced in, altered, disguised. She felt her whole body cold. A perfect plan, a drama that was staged for 3 years. So why do you have a different identity? He pursed his lips. I believed her story. But then he started having dreams. Dreams in which he saw completely different things. Another home, another life. He started searching, but she was always there, stopping him, until you decided to leave. And you changed your name. I have nothing left. No memories, no one to ask, no anything but what she had drawn for him. He needed a fresh start, so he created another life. But this time, it was by his own choice, not by her forcing him. The wife doesn't know what she should feel right now. Should she grieve for what he went through? Or angry that he didn't find her sooner? Do you believe me? She asked, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper. Do you believe that we were once husband and wife? He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. Now I do. But is that enough? It had taken them 3 years. 3 years separated by a terrible lie. But more importantly, he was no longer the man she once knew, and she is no longer the woman who once trusted him unconditionally. There is now a huge distance between them, a void created by stolen memories, by a past that has been erased. Do you want to remember? She asked, and when he looked into her eyes, she saw a vague fear. I don't know, he whispered. And that is the most painful thing. Not the betrayal, not the separation, but the fact that the man in front of her, the man who had once been her husband, was now no longer sure whether he wanted to return to her or not. The wife stood silently looking at her husband, her hand clasped tightly around the stack of papers and photos in her bag. She knew that this was the most important moment, the moment where she needed to show him the truth that he had been deprived of for the past 3 years. She couldn't let everything fall into nothingness. Couldn't let a cruel lie take away everything they once had. She placed each photo on the table. First was their wedding photo, a photo in which he smiled happily next to her, his eyes filled with love that had now completely disappeared. Next were family photos, moments they shared together, beach vacations, dinners together, the moment he hugged her tightly when she was tired after a long day. She wanted him to see everything, wanted him to understand that this was not a scam, not a made-up story. His hand trembled as he picked up a photo. He looked at it for a long time, his eyes wavering slightly. She clearly saw the struggle in him, clearly saw the storm stirring in his mind. He is struggling with himself, with the vague memories that are slowly returning, but also with the fear of discovering that he has been living a lie for the past 3 years. "Do you remember this photo?" she asked, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "This is our wedding day. I promised that I would always be by your side, that nothing could separate us. Do you really not remember?" He frowned, his forehead wrinkled, as if he was trying to rummage through a deeply buried memory. Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of light, a moment of recognition, but then it was gone. "I remember being somewhere with light like that," he said slowly, his voice cracking, "but I don't know. It just feels so far away." She clenched her hands, pain choked in her chest. She needs to do more than that. She placed their marriage certificate on the table. "This is a legal document. We are legally married. All the information is here. This is the address of the house we used to live in. This is my signature." He stared at the paper, his eyes seemingly empty, but reflecting a deep confusion. His fingers lightly touched his own signature, as if trying to feel whether it was really a part of him or not. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he whispered, as if talking to himself. "If this is true, then who have you been these past 3 years? At that moment, the door opened. The other woman rushed into the room, her face pale, her eyes panicked. She realized something was wrong, felt danger when the man she had controlled for so long began to suspect. "Don't listen to her," she screamed, running to him, her hands clasping his arms. "She's just trying to deceive me. Everything we had together was real. I can't believe the things she said." The wife turned sharply, her eyes burning with anger. "She's tricking you," she spoke loudly, her voice cracking with tension. "She lied to you from day one. For the past 3 years, she's lied to you about everything. She made up a completely false story just to keep you by her side." "Incorrect," the other woman screamed, her eyes sparkling with fear. "You took care of me. You were there for me. Who was the one who worried about me every night? Who was there when I didn't remember anything about myself? It was me." "And where is she? Where was she when I needed her?" The wife was so angry that she was shaking. "I've been looking for you for 3 years. I haven't stopped looking. I've been living in hell because I didn't know where you were, because I thought you were dead. Do you know what I went through?" The husband took a step back, his eyes shifting from his wife to the other woman. He was completely torn between two opposing streams of information. The wife tried to regain her composure and looked deeply into his eyes. "Look at me. Look at these pictures. Look at this paper. You don't have to believe me right away, but you have to believe the truth. You can't live in this lie forever." The woman became agitated. She grabbed the man's hand, her voice urgent. "Don't leave me. I can't leave you. You're all I have. If I leave, I'll lose everything. I'll lose the life I built with you." He closed his eyes, his hands clenched at his temples, as if his mind was in excruciating pain. "Stop," he muttered, his breathing quickening. "Stop it. I can't take it anymore." The wife stepped forward and gently placed her hand on his. "You don't have to choose anyone. You just have to choose the truth." At that moment, an image suddenly flashed in his mind. A brief moment, but enough to make him feel something. He saw a woman in a white dress, with a radiant face, smiling at him in the middle of a sunset. He sees that he was once happy with her. He saw her. His eyes opened wide, his chest heaved, his heart beat harder than ever. "I miss you." The other woman was really panicked. Her eyes went crazy when she saw the change in him. "No! I can't miss her. I can't leave you." But it was too late. The man saw the truth. He withdrew his hand from her and slowly walked toward his wife. His hand trembled as he touched the wedding photo. Then he looked at her for a long time. The woman stepped back, her whole body trembling, then suddenly shouted, "You will regret it." She rushed out of the room, slammed the door, leaving the two of them standing silently in a space full of broken memories. The wife didn't dare say anything. She just looked at him, waiting for him to make the final choice. He looked at her deeply, then whispered, "I want to remember everything." She closed her eyes, tears welling up. She knows that the battle is not over yet, but at least this is the first step to regaining the man she loves. In the days after the fateful confrontation, everything seemed strangely quiet. But deep inside, it was a storm that devastated everything. The husband began to recall lost memories, images from the past that he thought were gone forever. At first, they were just fleeting moments. A smile, a look, a familiar voice echoing in his head. But then, layer by layer of the past was gradually peeled back, recreating before his eyes the life he once had with the woman standing in front of him, his legal wife. He remembered the days with her, the times they walked together under the trees, the mornings he woke up and saw her lying next to him, the endless conversations about the future they had drawn. He remembers even the small but precious memories. The way she used to giggle when watching a comedy movie, the way she frowned every time she concentrated on work, the way she leaned her head on his shoulder when she felt tired. Everything seemed so clear, as if a door in his mind had opened, allowing him to look back at his entire life before the accident. But along with those memories, he cannot deny another truth. During the past 3 years, even though he was deceived, even though he lost his memories in the world in which he lived, that woman had also become an important part of his life. He fell in love with her, not because he was forced to, or because he had no other choice, but because for a while, she was the only person he knew. Guilt weighed heavily on him as he looked at his wife. She fought tirelessly to find him, to bring him back, to bring him the truth he had lost. But now, when everything gradually became clear, when he finally remembered everything, he could not escape the fact that his heart had changed. He looked at her, his voice shaking as he said, I'm sorry." The wife did not respond immediately. She had expected this, but when she actually heard him say it, she still felt her heart ache. She hoped, waited, fought hard, but the cruel truth was still there. Sometimes, just finding someone again doesn't mean everything will return to the way it was. "Do you remember everything?" she asked, her voice light but filled with fatigue. He nodded. Yes, little by little. Everything became very clear. She looked at him for a long time, then slowly asked, "So now, what are you going to do?" He was speechless. That question was like a knife stabbing straight into his mind. He thought that when he remembered everything would automatically rearrange into the right place. He would return to his wife, and they would continue the life they once had. But now, he realizes that nothing can be that simple. He choked, unable to continue. The wife sighed. She looked at the man in front of her, the person she loved more than anything, the person she had exchanged 3 years of her life to find again. But now, he no longer belongs to her. "You don't need to say anything else," she said, her voice strangely calm. "I got it." He looked at her, his eyes shining with desperation. "I don't want to hurt you." She smiled faintly, but it was a bitter smile. "I already did." Silence covered the whole room. He wanted to say something, wanted to do something to erase the pain in her eyes, but he didn't know where to start. In the end, she was the one to break the silence. "We used to have a happy life, and I know, if it weren't for that accident, maybe everything would still be the same. But it happened, and we can't turn back time." He bowed his head, feeling terrible about himself. I don't want to lose you." She took a deep breath as if gathering the courage to say something she herself didn't want to admit. "I lost you." That sentence was like a knife cutting every last tie between them. She stood up, packed up the photos, the papers, all the things she had brought with her to prove to him their existence. But now, she no longer needs them. He looked after her, his eyes filled with deep sadness. "Will you be okay?" She paused for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I'll be fine. I finally have the answer I've been looking for the past 3 years." He wanted to hold on, wanted to say that they could find a way to start over, but deep inside, he knew that it wasn't fair to either of them. She spent 3 years of her life looking for him, and he spent 3 years living a different life. Even though memories come back, time has changed everything. She walked to the door, then stopped again. She turned her head to look at him. This time there was no longer anger or pain in her eyes, only a calmness filled with regret. "I wish you happiness," she said, then turned and walked away. He wanted to call her back, but couldn't. He could only stand there, watching her leave his life again. But this time, it was her own decision. She walked out of the building, feeling the cold wind brushing against her skin. She doesn't know where she will go. She doesn't know what the future will be like, but at least she no longer has to live in doubt or suffering. She fought hard, and now she knows that sometimes letting go is not defeat, but liberation. The lesson she realized after everything that happened is that love does not always win everything. There are things that, once lost, cannot be regained. She can find the man she loves, but she can't force him to love her like before. She can bring him back into her life, but she can't erase the 3 years he lived without her. She had lost him, and he had lost her. But she is no longer the weak woman she once was. She has grown up and learned how to let go, and for her, that was a victory. Life always contains ironies. There are people who spend their whole lives looking for love, but when they find it, they can't keep it. There are relationships that seem eternal, but are easily broken because of an unexpected event. And there are also people who, despite loving each other dearly, still have to leave each other in the end because of things no one can control. This story is a clear testament to that love does not always win. That there are things that, no matter how hard we try, cannot return to the way they were. The wife in this story spent 3 years searching for the man she loved. She lived in despair, confusion, struggling with the pain of loss without knowing that her husband was still alive, still somewhere but belonging to another life. When she finally found him, she hoped that their love was strong enough to overcome everything. But she did not expect that he loved someone else during the time he lost his memory. The question is, can love start again from scratch? The husband does not actively betray his wife. He was stripped of his memories, deceived, placed into a completely new life without knowing about his past. But the sad thing is, no matter what situation happens, love is still affected by time. 3 years is not a short period of time. During those 3 years, he formed another life, loved another person, even though that love was built on a lie. But feelings cannot be changed. He can recall everything, but he cannot forget what happened in the past 3 years. So, should the wife continue trying to win back her love, or should she let go, so they can both start a new life? She chose the latter. Why? Because she understands that love cannot be forced. Memories can return, but emotions cannot be easily changed. She can win back the man she loves, but she cannot win back his heart. She can make him remember their happy days, but she cannot make him forget the past 3 years. Forget the woman who was by his side during that time. And she doesn't want to keep someone just because of responsibility, obligation, or because of a past that is no longer intact. This is the biggest lesson from this story. Love is not just about promises or beautiful memories, but also about choices. If a person no longer belongs to us, no matter how hard we try to hold on, it will only make both of us suffer more. The wife chose to leave, not because she no longer loved, but because she understood that true love is not about possession, but about allowing the other person to freely choose their own happiness. And more importantly, she also deserves a chance to find new happiness. Someone who truly appreciates her, not someone who, despite remembering everything, her heart is no longer as intact as before. What do you think about this story? If you are the wife, are you brave enough to let go, or will you continue to fight to win back the person you love? If you were a husband, would you choose according to your memories or your emotions? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Let's discuss this situation, because maybe your perspective will help someone find answers for their own life. Don't forget, click like and share. if you find this story worth pondering. If you want to follow more profound and emotional stories, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next content. Thank you for taking the time to follow, and see you in the next story.
Mm-hmm.